So I'm calling in from the Netherlands, where the European Center for Not-for-Profit Law is based. My name is Karolina Iwanska. I work as a digital rights advisor at the center at ECNL. We are a civil society organization that is based in The Hague in the Netherlands, and we work on protecting and promoting civil society and civic freedoms, also in the context of digital rights and new technologies. So I primarily focus on our advocacy towards the EU, and this is a topic that I was asked to present on today, to share with you some recent developments when it comes to the regulation of artificial intelligence in the EU. In the context that it's one of the first comprehensive regulations of AI in the world, and in that sense, it can be not necessarily an inspiration, which you will see in a minute why I claim that, but it can be a starting point for discussion of how to regulate AI. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Fantastic. If we could move on to the next slide. Just a little bit of context for the EU Artificial Intelligence Act. So it has been adopted in 2024, in early 2024. It just came into effect on the 1st of August. However, there is a period of couple of months before it will actually start to apply. And it will start to apply in a gradual manner. First, provisions will come to effect in February 2025, but the full application is only expected in 2027. So 2026, 2 years after entry into effect. So that providers of AI systems and deployers of AI systems can have time to fulfill the conditions. This regulation will be directly applicable in all EU member states. So all 27 EU member states, and the broad aim of this regulation is to really harmonize the internal market on AI within the European Union. So that means, what are the conditions that those companies or public institutions that want to develop and sell or use AI in the EU, what are those conditions that they should fulfill while protecting human rights, fundamental rights? So I will be presenting a civil society perspective on this. We were involved in advocacy around the Artificial Intelligence Act from the very beginning. So from 2020, where the white paper was released by the European Commission with ideas for how to regulate AI. And we've been very active in the process together with our partners at the European Digital Rights Initiative, which is a network of organizations in the EU. And this is it has been a lot of work from civil society around this regulation, and I will share with you what are the key elements of the Artificial Intelligence Act. Of course, it's only going to be a sketch because we don't have much time, but I hopefully it will provide some context into what is the regulatory approach, what are the positives, what are the negatives of this approach, and what happens moving forward. If we could move to the next slide, please. The regulation is based on a kind of risk-based approach, which means that there is an assumption that certain types of AI systems are more risky than others. And that risk is in relation to health, safety, and fundamental rights. So that's the kind of context that the regulation is based on. And it essentially defines 4 levels of risk. Starting at the top of the pyramid, so the smallest sort of number of systems that will pose an unacceptable risk. So that means AI systems whose risk to fundamental rights and to health and safety is essentially too high to allow for the development and use of these systems. So in practice, these type of systems are prohibited in the EU. They cannot be developed, they cannot be put on the market, so they cannot be sold in the EU, they cannot be put into use. However, they can be exported. So this is the tricky part. They still can be, research can happen around them, and the EU law will not apply externally. So export controls are not part of this approach, which is problematic because if we assume that the risks to fundamental rights are too high for a specific system, why then does that assessment differ in other countries? But that's a side note. Then the second category is high risk. So these are the kind of systems that are deemed to have high risks to fundamental rights, and they essentially will have to fulfill certain conditions based on which they will be able to be put onto the market and sold and used. The two other categories are systems that so-called limited risk, and they only have transparency obligations under the AI Act. So, for instance, to inform people about operations of these systems. One of these systems can be a chatbot, for example. So chatbots have been classified as limited risk, and essentially providers of these systems, they have to inform the person that is interacting with the chatbot that it is essentially an artificial intelligence system. And the last category is minimal risk, which is the vast array, essentially everything that is not identified as unacceptable risk, high risk, or limited risk is deemed to be minimal risk, and there essentially no requirements apply. The AI Act essentially only applies to the two top categories and to some limited extent to this limited risk category. So now I will go through some of these categories to kind of highlight what are the types of AI systems, what types of obligations are there. So if we could move to the next slide, please. And that concerns prohibited AI systems. So what systems have been considered unacceptable in the AI Act? So this is not an exhaustive list. I just wanted to flag to you which type of AI systems we are dealing with. Essentially, the first one I would highlight is real-time remote biometric identification. So that could include facial recognition, for instance, and that would be prohibited in publicly accessible spaces. However, only for the purposes of law enforcement. So in case a private sector operator uses facial recognition in a shopping mall, for instance, that is not included in the prohibition. However, an important caveat here is that other EU laws do not stop to apply. So for instance, data protection law still applies. And there have been many cases already that facial recognition is prohibited under the GDPR, under data protection law in the EU when it comes to the private sector, which is the sort of justification why only these systems have been included as prohibited. However, there are exceptions to this prohibition, essentially when it is necessary for the targeted search of victims of crime, prevention of a terrorist attack, search of the perpetrator of a crime. And these are quite broad, unfortunately, and they're quite far-reaching. So essentially, law enforcement, police can say that they need to use those systems to prevent terrorist attacks, and in that case, national legislation can authorize the use of such systems. So the actual question of how effective this prohibition will be in practice is very questionable. Some other prohibitions include emotional recognition. So systems that purport to recognize emotional states of people. However, that has only been limited to the area of workplace and education. So that would be only prohibited in workplace and education. And for instance, not what has been our criticism throughout the legislative process, not in the context of law enforcement and migration, which are arguably the most risky areas of use of such systems, or where there are actually already documented uses of such systems, which have brought a lot of harm to people involved. Another type of AI system that's going to be prohibited is predictive policing. So any AI systems that conduct sort of individual risk assessments of whether someone will be a criminal or whether they will reoffend, or you can think of the famous the infamous system from the US, Compass, that was predicting the risk of recidivism, that was highly discriminatory. So these are the type of systems that will be prohibited. There is also biometric categorization, so it's kind of linked to identification. It's about putting people into certain categories based on their sensitive characteristics and biometric data. So for instance, using technology that is not necessarily recognizing people's faces, but is, for instance, recognizing the way that they walk, which is also biometric data, and putting them into, risky, non-risky category. That is also banned, with exceptions. And then finally, social scoring. You can think of the social scoring system in China as an inspiration for this one. It's essentially a prohibition of kind of evaluating people's trustworthiness, and creating social scoring about, whether these people will be able to access education or benefits or, public services. So that will also be prohibited. So as I mentioned, these are, our assessment is that it's great that those prohibitions are there. That's already a really good step up towards the status quo. However, the fact of those far-reaching exceptions make it possible to actually authorize most of these systems in practice. And the question is of, how oversight will look like, whether this is not going to be abused. There are no prohibitions in the politicized area of migration, which is a very political topic at the moment in the EU. And that has essentially been removed from the area of prohibitions. So for instance, this remote biometric identification, it can be used technically in the migration area, but not law enforcement. So this is highly problematic for protection of rights of people on the move. And then there is also a bigger issue, is that there is also a very broad exemption for national security. So none of these prohibitions will apply when national security is invoked by member states. And that is very difficult to control. So it remains to be seen how effective these prohibitions are going to be in practice. They already kick in February. So they will start applying from February 2025. And as civil society, we will be monitoring how this is being put in practice. And we can move on to the high-risk systems now. So next slide, please. And just to highlight what are the type of users that have been classified as high-risk systems. I will not go through all of them. You can just see what type of AI systems have been included. Essentially, many of them are linked to public services, and areas where human rights can be most involved. So education, welfare systems, so for instance, access to benefits, law enforcement as well, in terms of systems are not prohibited. So for instance, geographic predictive policing, so assessing whether a particular neighborhood is, high risk in terms of crime, that is high risk. It's not prohibited, despite calls to prohibit it by civil society. As I mentioned, in migration, those systems are being used to, for instance, assess visa requests or visa applications, asylum applications, to conduct assessment of risk of individuals who are crossing borders. That's a high risk as well. And then these are mostly, as you can see, kind of public sector users. In terms of the private sector, some, if private companies use biometric systems lawfully, that will be considered high risk. Also employment area. So if AI systems are used for recruitment or worker management, that is also high risk. And also in financial sectors, so credit scoring, as well as assessment of insurance premiums. And this list is updatable. Every year, the European Commission can update this list based on emerging risks, which is good because it makes it sort of flexible and adaptive to emerging risks. And then what does it mean? If a system is categorized as high risk, so if it's falling into one of these categories, then it means that strict regulatory safeguards apply. And these can be distinguished between providers or developers of those systems and deployers or users. So providers conduct a conformity self-assessment. So it's based on self-assessment. They essentially have to check the risks, conduct an impact assessment, implement mitigation measures for those identified risks, check for data quality, prevent biases, maintain technical documentation, kind of ensure high level of accuracy, robustness, and cybersecurity. So you could argue that these are, the sort of things that any responsible AI provider should do anyway, but it's being essentially mandated on them. And the important thing is that also the deployers. So for instance, if there is a company that is developing a system that is assessing whether people should get or not benefits, and then that system, so they have all these requirements that I just mentioned, and then the deployers, so the public authority, for instance, the municipality of Amsterdam, let's say, if they're using this system in practice, they also have to conduct a fundamental rights impact assessment before deploying the system. So there are additional checks for deployers to make sure that they don't violate people's rights. There is also a transparency register where both public sector deployers and all providers have to register their systems and provide a certain level of information about how these systems work, which can be a tool for civil society, for activists, for journalists, for researchers to actually check, what are these systems that are being used. And in terms of enforcement, there is going to be a post-market surveillance by an authority, but we are going to touch on that in 2 slides. But last thing I wanted to say here, if we can move on to the next slide, is to talk about a special category of AI systems that has been included that does not fit into the risk pyramid, as I showed you, which is the general purpose AI system. So think, ChatGPT, other large language models. So that is a category of systems that doesn't have an intended purpose. So you have seen in the previous slides that all these systems are about, they are intended to be used by law enforcement for a specific purpose. And these are the sort of systems that don't have a predefined purpose. So they can be used for multiple purposes. ChatGPT, I think, is the example that many people will know. So essentially, they also will have some obligations under the AI Act, from maintaining technical documentation, implementing a copyright policy, ensuring that data that the system is trained on doesn't violate copyright, some publication about the sources of information that are used for training. And then the biggest general purpose AI systems like ChatGPT, they have been classified as so-called systems that are posing systemic risks, and they will have additional obligations. So they will have to identify and mitigate risks. They will have to document and report serious incidents, like violations of fundamental rights, for example, and ensure cybersecurity. So there's an extra level of protection on those biggest, most impactful systems. So if we can move on, because I know that we don't have much time, I have 2 more slides before we can move to the Q&A. I just wanted to briefly touch on enforcement. So what is the idea for the how are these rules actually going to be enforced? As I mentioned, a lot of it is self-assessment. So it's actually up to providers and up to deployers to say, oh, my system has these sort of risks. This is how I'm going to prevent them. This is how I'm going to mitigate them. And this is very much embedded in the sort of market surveillance logic, because this law comes from a long tradition of product safety legislation, think chargers, light bulbs. So it's really up to the company to ensure that certain standards are being maintained. So there is no straightforward complaint mechanism for affected people, which is a big criticism that we have as civil society, because if you have been subjected to a system that should be prohibited, you essentially have no recourse unless the authority takes the initiative to actually enforce the law, which is highly problematic. So there will be attempts, I guess, by civil society to establish pathways of communication with enforcement authorities to make sure that there is a way to flag violations. So enforcement will be divided between, I will not go into much detail here, but will be divided between the EU authorities and the member states. And the European Commission, there's a new entity called the AI Office, which will be enforcing the rules for general purpose AI systems. So, think ChatGPT. And on the national level, it will be market surveillance authorities, which will be identified within a couple of months in each country. And they will essentially enforce the law vis-a-vis both providers that are based in this country and or putting this AI system on the market in a specific country, like let's say in France. And if the French police, for instance, uses an AI system, then also the French authority will be the enforcer. An interesting thing that I think is worth, it's good for inspiration for legislation elsewhere, is that there are 2 bodies that will include external expertise, and that's the scientific panel and the advisory forum. The scientific panel will advise the AI office when it comes to general purpose AI systems. So really this sort of most, let's say, cutting edge, new types of systems. And this is going to be composed of independent scientists and experts. And the advisory forum is a consultative body that will also be composed of, company representatives, but also civil society. And that is an important kind of win for civil society, that we will have a seat at the table when it comes to advising the Commission and the other authorities in terms of how to apply the AI Act. If we can move on to the last slide before questions. I wanted to. You probably gathered from my presentation. Maybe just the previous slide for 1 minute. If you could gather from my presentation, the AI Act is an important effort to regulate AI, but it's far from a golden standard. It has way too many loopholes in terms of protecting fundamental rights. It does not prohibit, systems that should be prohibited, like facial recognition in all cases. It is highly reliant on self-assessment rather than, true regulatory sort of oversight. It doesn't really have complaint mechanism. There is a broad national security exemption. So there are a lot of things about the AI Act that are very flawed. So it's a warning, I think, of civil society, whenever other countries are thinking about AI regulation, is at least, to avoid these pitfalls. So last slide, please. And this is indeed fitting into a part of a larger regulatory trend. So the EU often tends to have a lot of influence on other regions in terms of how new technologies are being regulated. And this has been the case already. For example, you might have heard that also Council of Europe, which is it's broader than the EU. It includes more European countries. Also, those are not part of the EU, has adopted a framework convention on artificial intelligence, which is the first international treaty on AI, and it's open to signatories from around the world. So there is a chance that it will become a kind of global regulatory standard. And this is highly inspired by the AI Act. It's based on the same logic. It's weaker than the AI Act. So it's kind of worse than the AI Act because there had to be compromises with participating countries. It's another effort to regulate AI on the global level. And we have also seen, a lot of national level legislation in the US, China, Canada, Brazil, Costa Rica, others. I'm not aware of, maybe there have also been developments in your region as well. So this is really a trend that we are seeing. Also on the UN level, recently there has been a UN General Assembly resolution on artificial intelligence that is also, it's UN, so it's a relatively high level, but it's still, showing a political will to rein in these technologies, as well as, the Global Digital Compact, which is under negotiation right now and it's going to be adopted soon, which also has a chapter about artificial intelligence and aims to create a standardized approach to making sure that the systems are being developed in a responsible way. So I stop here. Thank you so much for your attention. Apologies for the first hiccup with the technical issues. I wonder if there are any questions that I can respond to. I think I saw some in the chat.
Thank you, Karolina. Do we have any questions in regards to the presentation?
I do see a question in the chat, so maybe I could read those out and respond first.
Oh, there's questions in the chat.
So I see a question from Brooke.
Right.
2 questions. So the first one is, what does remote mean when it comes to remote biometric identification? And whether it concerns, the type of processing, where it's processed. Thank you for that question. Just to clarify, the remote means it's not related to the type of processing, whether it's on, edge cloud or, somewhere else. It's related to the actual physical presence of devices and people who are being under surveillance. So if it's happening at a distance from the person involved, they're not. For instance, you could the non-remote identification is when you are passing a border and you are being scanned your face at the border. So that is not remote identification. The remote is when you are walking the street and the camera is like far, like more away from you, and you cannot see it, for example. You don't know that it's there. So that is what remote means in this context. It's really linked to the physical aspect of surveillance rather than where this data, it doesn't matter essentially where this data is being stored or processed. That is not relevant in this context. And then I think the second question is also linked to the same topic, but it's related to the GDPR. So the GDPR has long had the right for decision to be made by a human, and whether that also applies to remote biometric identification. That is an excellent question, and you're completely right. So the GDPR, as I mentioned, doesn't stop to apply. It's still, so maybe just for those of you who are not familiar with this provision, the GDPR says that a person cannot be subject to a decision that significantly impacts their life, their legal situation, or otherwise significantly impacts them, that is fully automated, that is made fully by an AI system. There has to be human intervention. And this is the case here as well. So nobody can be arrested just based on the remote biometric identification system, hit or no hit. Even in the AI Act, there is a requirement for police officers to verify that information. There is even, if I recall correctly, a double verification. So there is actually a higher threshold. They are, required to actually have two police officers essentially independently assess the results, and then any decision about starting an investigation or arrest or any other consequences, it has to be a human decision. So that is still the case. And real time means that assessment is being done, essentially real time, that whether, the cameras, the facial recognition cameras, they are processing that data in real time. There is also the retrospective facial recognition. So for instance, the analysis, and that is considered high risk, it's not banned. The analysis of, for instance, CCTV with biometric software. So already captured information and the analysis of that it's not real time, and that is not prohibited, which to me is, is a problem, because it doesn't matter if it's in real time or in post remote biometric identification, the consequences are the same. So, they're incredibly discriminatory, violating the essence of privacy. The European Data Protection Supervisor, for instance, which is an authority for data protection on the EU level, has also had calls to the EU institutions to ban remote biometric identification in all cases without any exceptions, both in real time and retrospective. It hasn't been done, unfortunately, but this is where the GDPR still continues to apply. And we are, as civil society, going to be using still these provisions to challenge these systems. I hope this answers your questions.
Thank you.
If there are any others,
you,
happy to respond.
Karolina, I will ask the audience if we have a question here for you.
Yeah.
We also would like to thank our participant online for joining us and for also participating in this session. So,
Jonathan Brewer, New Zealand. I'm wondering if there are opportunities you know of for Pacific regulators to learn more about these regulations. They seem very, very complex, and I think the regulators might benefit from some deeper than 1 hour education in it.
For sure, I definitely agree. It's hard for me to say, as someone who's not involved in the intergovernmental exchanges, to say what could be those fora. I think the IGF is a good forum for that, for showing lessons essentially. But I also know that there is a sort of interest and increasing trend to organize so-called AA summits by different governments. I know the French government is planning to organize an AA summit next year, so these could be good opportunities to exchange, although that is more on a political level, I think. But however, on the kind of, I think, the Commission and the AI office, they do have a sort of international program in terms of mostly, promoting EU regulation, but it's not even now about promotion. It's really just about exchanging and understanding how it's going to work. So I would say that regulators should, speak to each other through these kind of existing ways of collaboration. I know, for example, that many data protection authorities are going to be designated as authorities under the AI Act. So, and I know that already a lot of international cooperation exists for data protection authorities. There are, global data protection conferences specifically destined for the authorities, and that's a good forum for exchange. And I think, if increasingly countries around the world adopt AI legislation and adopt also authorities and regulators that deal with it, I think new fora will be needed and will start to emerge. This is, we only scratched the surface today, and this law is, I had to read it multiple times to fully even understand what is happening. I'm happy to, forward to the organizers some resources that I would recommend as a starting point. But ultimately, I think some cooperation fora will have to be developed. I would say IGF is a starting point. The global IGF is a starting point for exchange. And we will also have to see how the AI Act actually works in practice, because it's a very new regulation. It's very vague in many aspects, that many of these obligations are not operationalized and actually will take a lot of time. It will take 2 years to operationalize them, to develop standards, to develop methodology. And that is something where I think will be worth following, because this is where the devil will lie in the details in this context. So yeah, I would encourage you to follow also civil society organizations if you're interested. Like, we always have a lot of materials, educational materials, mostly towards civil society, but I think it can be also helpful for other stakeholders. So sorry, I don't have any more concrete answer to this, but I think it is just a matter of time that some form of collaboration fora will emerge.
Very much, Karolina, for that explanation. But we would like to ask if you can stay online. We would like now to ask the second presenter.
Thank you.
To come on stage, and maybe after that we can receive more questions from the participant this afternoon. Our next presenter and his team will be presenting on the usage of AI in the Pacific. He's well known in the academic fields. I think it will be best if he introduce himself, Dr. Sharma. I don't want to lie to the colleagues here and online, but please, the floor is yours and your team.
Thank you, Save. Bula and Pacific greetings to you all. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Sorry, being a teacher is always a teacher. You have to ask twice, You say good morning, good afternoon, nobody says it. Everybody's busy with their smartphones, etc. So the second time around, it makes some sense that people are actually responsive. I'm Bibhya Sharma from University of the South Pacific, and we have our colleagues. They are not in my team. They are in their own separate teams, by the way. And they will join me in this presentation. They can come in whenever they want, and they'll speak about basically the use of AI in higher education and how we are planning out to do things in the future. We played rock, paper, scissors, and I was picked, so I'll make a start. No? Oh, okay. Right, so while we are waiting, remember, if we are teachers, we don't stop, whatever is happening, we'll just keep on talking. Whether people are listening or not is still fine. So yes, I think this AI is bringing to us huge potential. If you just look at it, there's so many things that can happen in the Pacific, like what we had in terms of ICT earlier on, 10, 15 years on. So I think now we are progressing to AI, and like Karolina already said, we still don't know its potential, but we have to be prepared. We have to be prepared, like there was a visit 1 month ago from Dr. Ruman Chaudhary, the US science envoy, and she said basically that we are experiencing now AI wave in the Pacific. So I'll start off with that. Am I able to start now? No?
I think
No, the slides have been sent, yes.
they don't have it.
Would you like to say a few words, introduce yourself?
Okay, thank you, Professor Sharma. My name is Ashutosh. I'm from Fiji, and I'm working at the Fiji National University. We wanted to actually, we had two presentations, so we are representing the two universities in Fiji, so we decided to do it together, right? And with me, I have my colleague, Miss Sala. She's a manager in applications in the ITS at Fiji National University. And with myself, I have Jasbinda. He is joining us right from Fiji at the moment, and he's an instructor in IT. So the challenge here is, while they're still setting up the slides, so AI has become a huge issue in terms of education. Right? We are still planning on how much AI we can use. I mean, what AI is. In Fiji, I think the only thing, if you say AI, okay, people would know, okay, only ChatGPT, right? As educators, we want to also tell students to use AI, but we sometimes want them to refrain and use their brains, right? While they can, not for using for assessments, right? Not copying directly. But as I think Professor Sharma and USP and FNU, we are working and trying to set up guidelines. I mean, we as universities, we are also in the dark of how we are going to plan this out, how these things will portray, right? And that is what we want to have a discussion on here today, and that is what we want to talk about. Professor Sharma?
Sorry. In apologies, this is where law enforcement comes in and try and resolve this issue. So if we can bring Mr. Jasbir online, and he may be able to start with his presentation,
yeah,
since we are running out of time, and then we'll close it off with Dr. Sharma. Please.
You need AI to help.
Yes. I mean, with the presentation by Karolina and the work that they have done in AI, we are still learning from what we have missed in the past, and now we have been put into advanced technology in the use of AI. I'm not surprised that some of us are lost and sleeping at the moment. Yes. The computer is confused. Yes, Mr. Sharma, please. I think we go back to the order of presentation.
Thank you, Save. Yeah, welcome back, audience. Thank you. I'll skip some of these things because I feel that we are racing against time, but this is basically what we will do. We'll tell you a little bit about what our universities do, what is our target in terms of AI, some of the gray areas which I feel we should be solving together, and then some of the solutions which we can deliberate upon a little bit later. AI, if you look at the potential, especially in the Pacific, it's huge. And like I was saying, this is basically, if I try to think of something like this, then in Fiji we have this season in April where we get lots of netli or anchovies. And these would be buckets load of, not buckets, drum load of anchovies coming to the shores. You know, so it's like anchovy waves after waves coming to the shores. And I feel that AI is basically the same. We have these AI waves coming to our shores with lots of potential and lots of uncertainties. We don't know actually what is happening. We don't know what is right, how much we can. For example, the anchovies, we didn't know how much to harvest. We harvested so much that we could not control. We let it rot. Okay? So it has its plus and minuses, which we probably can discuss a little bit later. And moving on, if you look at higher education, then again, there's huge potential if you look at how we can use AI for our teaching, for our learning, for our student support, for our student retention, and for research. These are 5 arms, and my colleagues will agree, these are 5 major arms which we have in the higher education. I'll not look at the examples for now. And again, if you look at what is happening in the Pacific, I think we all know that there are many pockets of excellence. There are a lot of work being done in this area. If you look at AI, or if you look at even cybersecurity, there is lots of cases, lots of people who are actually working in this. If you see, for example, UNESCO, that was Dr. Libing Wong. We have Australian government that has committed 39.9 million in its last budget for AI work in terms of competencies and regulatory measures. We have Ministry of Education, Fiji, that are trying to look at having AI implemented in the schools, in the primary and secondary levels. So these are some good cases, some good work that have started actually. And I go back to what Dr. Ruman Chaudhary was saying, that there is potential of us using AI to address our climate resilience and mitigation. So CIWA is working in that particular direction, and people are talking about how journalism can use AI, because we know there are lots of fake news going around, deep faking, if you must have heard. All these things are happening because of AI. So there is this dark side of AI which we have to tackle as well. And then we have, again, many small projects that are happening in the Pacific. For example, insurance claims, how it could be fastened, how the payment could be fastened. And like I said, when there is a lot of data, we're talking about AI, you're talking data. And when we talk about data, there is cybersecurity. And again, in the Pacific, we have got many, many cases that have come up. You know probably many more cases than me. We have cyber attacks in Fiji. We had this Vanuatu ransom. We had the Samoa, Cook Islands, and just recently in Fiji, we had the M-Pesa, where people just took money from your M-Pesa account. So there are lots of things happening, which means that there is a role which we all play, including the higher education, FNU, and all the regional universities, as well as the national universities. Again, this is just for University of the South Pacific, but I think this is the same for all the other universities as well. You guys can chip in whenever you want. We had, I just basically try to say that there are 3 different clusters, 3 different levels of where we use AI at University of the South Pacific. There is the institutional level, which I'll discuss a little bit in detail. There is the service level, as well as we're going to the course level. If you look at institutional level, then what is happening across university? Well, there are certain things which we have just started. We have started to have our policy, our ethics policy for AI. We have started to introduce AI, ethics, as well as use of ChatGPT in our generic course. Generic course basically means it is mandatory for all programs. So people at least will know the ethics around AI, how to use AI, what is good, what is bad. We also have some documentation for the facilitators on what to expect from students and how they could use AI for themselves. So these are things that are happening at the higher level. We are also, and I'll talk about that a bit later, we are also trying to introduce some programs in AI. This is something which I think is happening in all higher education institutes, where we are trying to improve the performance in terms of HR. You guys have the same? Would you like to discuss that a little bit?
Right. What specifically in FNU, okay, what they're trying to do with the HR, right? They've, I think the first things that FNU is trying to do is, at the moment we have got a new PMP system, okay, that has just got into place, okay, and we have been able to, I mean, kind of Actually, at the first, we are trying to get our things right at the moment, right? By introducing a good appraisal system, a PMP system for this. For FNU, I would say, I mean, it would be a very first step in AI for HR, right? They're still exploring their ways through it. Because USB, I think, was more into with aspects of HR, right? But we are still trying to explore that area of getting our things right now. At the moment, there's still, I mean, Sala would be able to explain more. It's on the banner end.
We've just completed our implementation. So currently, right now, I think we're trying to customize and tailor-make it to suit our university. But just to add on to Professor, because FNU is also working towards implementing and designing an AI policy. So just early last month, this is actually led by our Learning and Teaching Unit, working closely with our School of Mathematics and Computing Science. So just early last month, they conducted a student survey. And very shortly, they'll also conduct one for staffs in terms of our supporting departments. So with the data collected, this is to assist them as well in terms of designing a policy. Maybe Savi can correct me on this one, but currently we don't have any AI policy at the national level. But this is something that will be interesting and also crucial that we also require a need, and maybe from there, as a university, higher education, and organizations, we can always benchmark to collectively work with, because currently we don't have anything at the moment. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Ala. See, this is teamwork. Who says university and FNU are fighting? We are not. We're working together. So coming back to our HR, yes, I think there are many things we can do, and the presentation before that was quite good as well, because they basically talked about there are risks. For example, when we're trying to scan, we're trying to filter applications. And obviously it could be a person who has got fabricated the grades and fabricated the certificates. So how can AI find out? Manually, may be possible. AI, is it possible? Well, there are risks involved. It may be possible. So we are still learning. AI is also learning. Yeah? And also, I think there is a very high turnover of employees you might have seen in the Pacific. Why? Because everybody is going to New Zealand. I was talking to Ian. I said, Ian, everybody is going to New Zealand. Ian said, well, we are complaining as well. I said, why? He said, well, from New Zealand, everybody is going to Australia. So yeah, this is a cycle. But yeah, there's a problem. And I think we have to know which are the areas being targeted, so that we are proactive and we are able to carry out the staff development, professional development, and also to keep the staff morale high. It's something which we urgently need to do. In terms of research, we have carried out a number of research. We are working in many, many areas, either using AI as a tool or researching on AI. I think it's important to research on AI as well, to find out our perspectives, to find our attitudes of using, to find out our readiness. Sometimes, and like Ian, again, I go back to Ian every time, he also said about one laptop per child. It failed. Why? People were not ready. People were not trained. The same thing with AI. If we just bring in AI and people do not know, they're not ready, same thing will happen. I'll tell you another story. This was my first incident with AI. I typed in chat, I went to ChatGPT, I said, okay, where's Bibhya Sharma? And it said, Bibhya Sharma died in 2016. So I don't get along with AI, by the way. I don't like it. So yeah, there are many options and many things we are doing, and I think this is another place where we should be collaborating. All of us should be collaborating when we look at how we can use AI in climate resilience, in mitigating factors. How can we do that? What are we able to do? And I go this time to Dan, when Dan was saying, and I think Keith was saying as well, Dawn and Keith were saying that there's prospect of telemedicine. Telemedicine is an old concept, 10, 15, 20-year-old concept, where we used to have these tele appointments. But now telemedicine is different. It has transformed to include diagnosis. It has transformed to include the first level of treatment. And that is what we need for our people in the remote areas. We don't have doctors in the remote areas, in all the remote islands, we don't. So how do we get the treatment? How do we look into this healthcare, maybe service, like an app? How do we do that? But again, somebody outside was telling me they will not accept, our people will not accept, they'll still want face-to-face. Well, okay, so this is where we bring in the awareness, we do some research, so that whatever interventions we have make sense to our people. You guys want to eat something? No? So this is basically what I was going into, trying to see how we are able to use our AI in ocean and climate management. We're talking about our stocks, fish stocks, ocean resources, dwindling. Why? Because of overfishing. We have to use AI to know, okay, right, this is how much stock we should have, ensure, so that we don't run out. Because Pacific cannot survive by just conservation, no. We need to balance it with economy, right? We need money as well. So we have to strike that balance. The balance can be found out, those thresholds can be found out using AI, I'm pretty sure. We talked about the breeding cycles of some of the fish in Fiji. What was salmon caught? You cannot do that. You cannot harvest in November up to April, maybe? November to April? Yeah. You cannot. But due to climate change, the breeding cycles have changed. Have we researched on that? No. So there is no use having the ban during that time. Sorry, I get upset a little bit.
Yeah, I think just to add, the main issue here is we need to find that line, that fine line is how much AI we can use, right? And where it can be an advantage and where it could be a disadvantage to us. I mean, like things like this, it'll give us more in depth, right? It assists, like we as educators, I mean, I confess I use AI, okay? Right? I mean, we all do. And I encourage my children to use it, but what are the ethics of how much we can use, right?
Thank you. And just to add a little bit more on that, I think this is, again, a very important subject for us when we talk about the e-waste system. We, again, survive on tourism, but tourism has to be sustainable. To have sustainable tourism, we have to ensure that we have e-waste system. E-waste is not electronic waste, but basically to use ICT to control our waste system. Maybe we can discuss this further later on when we have time.
Dr. Sharma, if I can add on to that.
Yes.
The things that we are discussing right now, they come at a very critical time, and so did our ROMAX indicator survey that a lot of stakeholders present in that forum would have been a part of. And through that forum, we were able to voice our concerns in terms of privacy and ethics with the use of AI. And since the Pacific region is on the brink of introducing major law reforms in terms of AI, use of AI, privacy. So a lot of our inputs have also gone into the ROMAX survey, and through which a lot of decisions will be made on the type of laws and the areas those laws will govern will be introduced. So we have done that as well. We're sort of looking at putting it out there as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And moving on to the service level, again, this is something which I believe most of the investees are doing. They're trying to update their model, trying to look into the Turnitin to ensure that they have these early warning systems. These early warning systems come out very easily if you look at the land analytics and lending analytics, which again, the pattern can be brought into light through AI. Our students actually, if I look at this one, our students, do they use ChatGPT?
Yes. Yes.
Hey, one of them, isn't it? So I received this email from students. They say, most honorable, respectful, rightful sir. As soon as you get that line, you know this is ChatGPT, you know. And the email is about 2 to 3 pages long. And at the end, there is one sentence saying, please extend the deadline of my assignment. So our students know how to use ChatGPT. It's not a problem. And, but I think what AI brings into this game is trying to use this learner analytics to ensure that we provide more personalized learning for them, more adaptive learning for them. You know, this is what we want to do, because not everybody has the same learning style, pace. So how do we bring AI? Well, we could again, Anju, you are exercising? And again, we could make AI bring in material specific for a learner. You'd like to add something, guys?
Yeah, I think for materials, right, specific to a course. I mean, if I have to take an online class, right, and I have to drag it to 3 hours maybe, I mean, I generally just go to ChatGPT and ask, okay, what are some of the, I mean, activities or workshops I can do on that particular day, okay, specific to the topic that I'm covering. So me sitting and most probably, I mean, sitting there and looking for activity and thinking, so it just gives me in 2 or 3 minutes, right? I mean, what I need to do. Other one, just I wanted to add on the projection that Professor Sharma has said, okay? Each universities in Fiji, okay, they do a projection of like, okay, year 13, this many students will finish year, okay, after the exams, and we need to get this much students here, okay, like FNU has this quota, okay, this is the threshold we need to go. USP has that. So maybe I'm using AI, okay, and we have like Power BI with Copilot built in. It will help both universities, right? I mean, there is a bit of competition there, but you still want to share, okay? But I mean, like looking at a business perspective, it does help, right? I mean, in analyzing and telling you, okay, these are the most probably, I mean, students you might be getting. And if you would, I mean, the university might need to increase the capacity, okay? It can also help the university plan things for, I mean, to create a better environment for the students.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that, because not all universities have the same programs very successful, right? So I think using these sort of patterns and doing this sort of prescription from AI, we should be able to, you know, division of labor. You guys take some programs, yeah. We'll take the major programs. Yeah. And this is for the lecturers again, how we use AI in our teaching. Actually, staff are now being able to create content for their lectures, which frees them from all this other work, and they can do more of a flipped classroom kind of teaching. Yeah. You know, so they have more time to concentrate on their teaching instead of working on these notes, which is already there. But again, there are lots of other things that come in, like how to do the assessments, how to get the data, and then how to, again, get students in certain streams so that we are able to help them in a more personalized way, as well as get a feedback from the students through AI patterns in saying, okay, this is how we should improve our teaching, improve our lectures, improve our delivery. This I will discuss tomorrow. And coming towards the end, this is the challenges which we face, the issues in the Pacific, whether we talk about academic integrity, we talk about transparency and accountability, like something what the previous presenter did talk about, it lacks transparency. Whatever AI gives you, the decision or the prescription, you don't know the process. So you don't know whether to say yes to it or not, how much to trust. Okay, and you don't know how, there's a lack of, there's a lack of understanding of the AI conclusions. So you had something to say?
Yeah, sorry, Doctor. If I can add on to this, onto the challenges, from the specific context, one of the major challenges that we are seeing globally with AI is job displacement. But what we might see with a lot of the developed nations is that when people are displaced from their jobs, they have a lot of industries, they can sort of retrain people to fit in one of those industries which AI cannot fully take over, or displacement is not affected. But for Pacific, that might not be the case. We don't have a lot of industries. We do manufacturing and all of those which are labor intensive, where people can go and actually work, but they're not at that scale, right? Where people, hundreds of people displaced at once can be absorbed at once by those industries. And when we look at our major industries, especially for Fiji, and I'll come back to how this is a university perspective thing. When we look at Fiji, there are a lot of we don't have many industries which are at that scale, which employ hundreds of thousands of people. There's your tourism industry, there's your manufacturing, and those sectors. But apart from that, there's not much. Even farming, we've seen is declining, especially the major crop, sugarcane. You know, the farming of it, the processing of it, you know, it's majorly in the decline. So what we need to consider is how, with the adoption of AI, what we need to see first is that adoption of AI does not overrun the development of new industries. Personally, that is what I think. So that we are able, if people do get displaced, we are able to provide employment for them. Because as it is, we already have a brain drain issue, as you mentioned. You'll see mini Fiji in New Zealand, and then soon in Australia, and then some other countries, right? So we already have a brain drain issue, but so with that being said, we want to retain our people with the right skills so that we can develop other people as well, develop our children, our youth as well in that line, right? So what we need to ensure is that the takeover of AI or the introduction of AI is at a controlled pace, sort of, from the perspective of usable tools, usable resources, the list of things that you showed on one of the slides, right? So yeah, so that is one of the things. And then obviously the universities are coming over here by introducing programs that allow us to explore new areas, uncharted areas, all right? One of the things I've been seeing as a trend possibly is how AI has matured over the years, and what we are seeing now, the LLMs, the large language models, things like Gen AIs, we had AI, as you said, is not new, right? But the introduction of LLMs, things like ChatGPT, put it out there to the world that these things exist and how they can be used. And those are huge systems, right? But now the focus of these systems is going to be to shrink those systems with the same capabilities to be able to make it specific to a person or a purpose, right? Maybe make it specific to a person of how they can use it for a specific task. Imagine the possibilities of putting such systems on a remote island and using technologies such as maybe AR and VR to teach someone how to build or construct, right? So if we put those skills in the right hands, using technologies as mentioned, you know, we take education to a new level in the Pacific, because a lot of our locations are remote or isolated, especially the maritime areas and the highlands, right? So those are some of my takes in terms of challenges before we move on to from this slide. And the other thing, when we talk about job displacement, the slide that you showed on HR department, or the slide that we have in our presentation about the HR department, the guy sitting there, tell me how much work will it take to fully automate that HR department? A lot of things that you put in there in terms of processes, the things that it does in terms of analysis of resumes, bringing out possible candidates for a position, looking at MQAs, KPIs. You know, a lot of things are already automated. The only thing the person in that department or the people in that department might be doing is saying, putting the human touch to it, assessing the human side of things, being able to assess human behavior. So we are already in that process, right, of automating a lot of things using AI. So we need to bring in that balance of AI takeover and creating new jobs for when AI does take over a certain role. So that's one of the challenges that we need to look at from a university perspective as well, I think, moving forward. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. We totally agree. You have something to add?
Yeah, I mean, the other challenge we have is, it's a very common one in the academic, is plagiarism, right? I mean, they stop students not to use ChatGPT because it's plagiarism. But what if you tell a ChatGPT, okay, write me this paper, give me the full in-text referencing and the referencing and everything. So what, is that still plagiarism? It's still referencing, it's giving you all the references. Anyone? Yeah, I mean, like we do have inbuilt Turnitin that analyze, okay, on the educators end, we are able to see how much AI content has been generated. But for FNU, I would say it does not add up to the total plagiarism count. Okay, you can only see, but it's not added. So if it's 100%, okay, AI generated, it might still give you plagiarism is just 1 or 2.
No, actually, Turnitin has the ability now. So if you've used 20% of AI, it will tell you 20% of AI separately. It's there with in our Moodle. Yes, it's there.
Professor, if I
Yes, please.
I think where Ashutosh is highlighting on, there's two types. One is where the student sees the percentage, and the other is where the educator looks at the percentage. So those are not in sync. So it's more the educator is the one with the report.
Okay, thank you. So we're running short of time, so I'll quickly rush in the last bits, but this is quite important actually, and we'll have the presentation slides available. Please have a look. If you want to discuss something on this, it's quite important, especially the job, because there's a big discussion about jobs that AI will take over the jobs. No, AI will make sure it'll create better jobs for you. And again, these were some solutions, but I think these have been discussed already, like trying to look into the policy matters, not just looking at higher education or at a certain level, but trying to look at the regional policies and the national policies in AI, trying to have the governing body, the management bodies in place to have this. And I think it's also very important to establish AI research centers, which looks into our climate resilience and mitigation factors. And I will not discuss this. This is something which I wanted to show you for promotion, because now we're having a Bachelor of Artificial Intelligence in USP. Yes? Okay.
We also have short courses in AI in FNU. So if you don't want to study for 3 years, we just have only 1 week.
Can we switch off his speaker, please?
We're working
this
together.
Was supposed to be for USP only. And I wanted to end with this. Please note, AI is also evolving. Yeah. We talked about a traditional, we now have generative, but agentic is coming soon. So for example, if we are trying to, let's say, try to find out 10 restaurants in Wellington, yeah, it will find out 10 best restaurants according to your preferences. But what agentic will do, it will also do the booking for you and do the orders for you, book the table for you. Yeah. Okay? So it's more like your virtual friend, avatar, together with you. So things are evolving. We have to be prepared. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sharma and your team. I hope agentic AI can also pay my bills. But yeah. Do we have any questions for the team? Yes. I will ask if we can just limit our questions, since we are running out of time, to 3.
Right.
And then we'll end it. Yes.
So I'm Ulrich Spider, or as ChatGPT also knows me, Professor Huge Spider from Waqa University. So what I was going to ask you is, so you mentioned the use of or misuse of AI by students, and one of the roles that I play in my school is actually that of academic integrity officer. And one of the things that we are finding is that around half of our students now use ChatGPT, and they're using it to generate their entire assignments or their entire assessment answers, if it's online assessments, and they have access to ChatGPT one way or the other, or they have access to a helper with ChatGPT, the answer will come from ChatGPT, and there's zero, from what we can tell, zero learning happening on the part of the student. And the other problem that we're facing with this is actually quite a logistical one, and the logistical one is that when you sort of go into the second half of a semester and your students are starting to slack off, traditionally they would not have submitted an assignment. But now everybody submits an assignment because it only takes 2 minutes to do one, and you don't have to have any idea what's in it. What are you going to do about this, and how much budget is your university willing to put towards marking gobbledygook that's been created at a huge volume, and as you say, several pages whenever a student writes to you, you know, how much budget are you willing to throw at people reading and assessing this? And do you see a possible use of AI for assessing whether it's been written by AI and is therefore not worth an answer?
I actually wanted to say that, yes. So this is a very difficult question. I see three different responses coming out from my brain at this time. One is AI tackles AI. So let AI do all the marking which AI has created. That's one. The other bit is to, well, this is what we can do, is to teach our students the ethical views about use of ChatGPT. I don't think we can eliminate the use of ChatGPT and AI, but if students are able to understand that there is a certain level of their responsibility, what needs to be done, then I think that is good. They need to use ChatGPT. I think that's good. To turn out some help for the students, I think that's very good. But then they will need to know, okay, this is where it stops and this is what I need to do. The other train of thought that is happening these days is trying to have AI-resistant assignments. And people have been talking about designing different assessments that are basically AI-resistant. I thought of looked into that and I felt, okay, this may be a good answer, but then I feel, no, we should not stop AI from happening. Yeah. So we should not have AI-resistant. It should be more of a AI hybrid kind of assessments.
Yeah. Just to add on to that, one of these university I know, and one of these lecturers at our university, I will not name. So what they have started doing is they've stopped giving assessments, and they've gone back to exams. So instead of assessment, they're giving like short tests. Yeah. So that students, they do not copy. So as Professor has said, we can't be running away from AI. Okay, AI is here to stay, and it will. So we have to find ways in order to battle this. The other thing is, we as universities, I think not of us only in Fiji, in the Pacific, we're kind of also in the dark of what are we going to do about this, how are we going to tackle about doing this. So I think what I would like to propose is, I mean, we are working alone. Why don't we, all the universities in the Pacific, we get together and try to work a solution out of it?
Thank you. Sutena will take you as the last question.
Sutena from Samoa. So I'm going to wear my ByteWatchers hat. So ByteWatchers is a AI startup in Samoa. We've been developing a chatbot. We've also presented our chatbot to the National University of Samoa to view what their concerns are. So the AI is a threat, but it is an alarming threat that maybe it can wake up the academia. Is it time to change the model in which we teach? Because in most academia, we are testing how much you know, but not testing how can you use the knowledge to build solution. Where from our perspective, as an AI startup, we want to use AI to be augmented. Like, it takes part of what the humans cannot do and use AI to do what humans, takes part of what humans cannot do and use AI to automate the knowledge gap. For example, we talk about using AI to build courses. So we can build courses, but the ethical side is still with the humans, so we can have a hybrid model. So so the question that I want to ask, is it time to reform our education system across the Pacific to help AI innovate the minds for solutions? So one of the tests that we presented on at the National University of Samoa was we took real information data from the Samoa Bureau of Statistics in terms of market trends, and then we gave it a problem. We had the information of market trends, and then we say, I'm a banana farmer. How do I build my company to meet the priorities or the mismatches of the market trend? And it produced the result, which means that it augmented what took months into a few minutes. So I think this is where we can ask the question, do we need a reform in our education system across the Pacific?
Good question.
Talofa, brother, and thank you for the question. I think in some ways you have basically answered the question yourself by saying that we need a reform. We need a reform, a total reform. You know, we have to look at the curriculum, change the curriculum way of, like we discussed in the previous question, change the assessments, change how we assess our students. How can we retain the critical thinking factor, the creativity factor, which is now missing, because if total dependence on AI means that these are gone. But then AI is there to stay. If we look at the traditional ways of AI, if we have to go to a university website and try to find some course information, it takes bloody one whole day. Whereas ChatGPT can show you, because we have developed the ChatGPT to find out the course information. And the second level, for example, the other thing which was probably answering the previous guy's answer as well, which was talking about the intelligent tutoring system. We have our people who are working for 6-7 hours and that's it. But if we have this intelligent tutoring system, they can provide students answers, not answers, okay, help, 24/7 in a course, But then again, we have to develop those things. It doesn't, ChatGPT can make up things which may be wrong. So we have to feed it, we have to keep on making it learn. For example, if I type in my name now, it doesn't say I'm dead, it says I'm somewhere. So it's learning as well. So ChatGPT is there to stay, AI is there to stay, it will learn, but we have to reform. We have to collectively reform based on the evidence. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and I thank the panelists for this session. Karolina, if she's around, I think she has left us, but to the panelists from the 2 universities in Fiji, thank you very much for the informative session. It has given us some assurance that our academics are having a good grasp of AI technology, and hopefully that can bring them closer together as a family.
We are family.
Let's show appreciation to our
Thank
panelists.
you.
Yes.